Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live. We come at you 5 days a week. We're off Wednesday and Thursday during the regular season. Man, things get crazier and crazier. Every season's crazy, but hey, it's this season. That's our reality now. We'll talk about some of the craziness. We usually start the Tuesday show by talking about the Monday night game. I think tonight we'll talk about some injuries first. As I said tonight, I was thinking Monday night game. Today we'll talk about some injury news. Remember, bottom of the hour, Brandon Kravitz of RotoWire is coming in, talk some waiver wires with you as well. All right. So Justin Jefferson this morning lands on injured reserve. Not exactly what we were hoping to see. He was having another amazing season. Obviously, he left the game early and didn't return on Sunday. 571 yards through 5 games. It would have been higher had he not injured his hamstring in that game. Wow. To think, though, that DJ Moore only has 41 less yards and he has more touchdowns than Jefferson at that point. That is a little mind-numbing because, remember, Jefferson had 350-yard games coming out the gate. Now, again, I know that one game was cut short last week, but this isn't about DJ Moore. It's about Justin Jefferson. And obviously, many got him with the first pick in the draft. Occasionally, you may have had him in the second pick or something like this. So, yeah, this is a big hit. And the more competitive league that you're in, the more difficult. Morning, Charlene. Glad to see you here. And the more competitive league you're in, the more difficult it is to replace. You're not replacing Justin Jefferson, but getting somebody in your lineup. And in more shallower leagues, in the shallow leagues, you probably have good bench players. But, some of these 14-team leagues where there's no waiver wire, it's a bigger hammer the more challenging the league. In terms of just Minnesota themselves, if you're looking for help there, so K.J.Osborn gets targets. We know Jordan Addison's rostered everywhere. So, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer there that he will be counted on for more. The tough thing for Addison is that now, depending on the opponent, he potentially sees the team's number one corner. And I wonder how ready he is for that. Because remember, when teams play the Vikings, they are selling out to stop Justin Jefferson. The whole calculus of the offense changes without him in it. And, let's think receiver for a minute here. Brandon Howell stepped up with 6 targets, 4 for 43 in the game where Jefferson went down. So in 3 receiver sets right now, I know they do roster and Keel Harry, but I think Brandon Howell will factor in. K.J.Osborn will see targets. He saw 9 last week as well. He blocks. He's a great blocker. They love him. That's why he plays more snaps than Jordan Addison, but now they're both full-time players. I think Powell primarily will operate in the slot. And I do think this team, the Vikings, they're going to trail a lot and they're going to have to pass a lot. And their running game isn't good. Alexander Mattison had numbers in week 3 and 4 when he played bad defenses, but he's not a good running back. 8 for 26 against the Chiefs. That's more along the lines of what we're looking at out of him. He dropped an easy touchdown pass. Now he did score one as well. So, but Madison, I have to think at some point Cam Akers has to get more of a shot than he's getting here. We'll see how that shakes out. But, probably a little more of a timeshare. But the receiving game, TJ Hockenson, I don't know how many more targets he can handle. He gets 8 and 9 in a lot of games. But just basically because of the amount of throwing they have to do, Hockenson probably flirts at 10 targets a game now. And Jordan Addison probably averages 7 to 8 just because of the volume. They're throwing 40 plus times most games. So I think that's what we're looking at here. But the sneaky ad, is Brandon Powell in the deeper leagues. The deeper leagues, he's probably not rostered anywhere. Super, super deep leagues, maybe. So I think he's a sneaky ad. I don't think you're looking for a big ceiling out of him, but I do think you could get, 3 to 6 catches in many games. And sometimes that's enough if you need depth on your roster, somebody in the lineup, you're struggling through bye weeks and injuries. So there's that. Charlene, let me see. They did put Jefferson on the IR. That should take very soon, depending what site you're with. And I know, like RotoWire I work with, I know RotoWire, a lot of times we do drive a lot of the companies, like ESPN, once RotoWire acknowledges the injured. I'm going to look up for you right now to see if we have them listed at injured reserve. And let's see. So the last RotoWire piece still has him likely bound for IR. So if RotoWire is attached, they probably are in the midst of currently making that change. Chris, welcome. Glad you're here. Jack, glad you're here. Yeah. So Jack, my guess is that so again, I know we do ESPN. I think we do Yahoo too. And so I think that what'll happen is probably within a half an hour, my guess is that they'll make that change. So be ready to look for that. But definitely be with waivers. Unless you have free waivers, you can go in anytime. That the timing will be important. But if you have overnight waivers, that definitely happens by then. But I know RotoWire, we power a lot of those waiver wires. Morning again, everybody. Glad you're here. All right. So Devon Achane, he's likely going on the injured reserve. That's the expectation. Multiple weeks with a knee injury. I mean, my goodness. And I know, look, small sample size, but 12.1 yards per carry. How ridiculous is that to a start of a career for the young man? I hope the knee injury is not serious. I hope it's one that he comes back full speed. It's a treat to watch him play football. He also chipped in 9 catches for 67 yards, 7 touchdowns. And that was with him not playing week 1, barely playing week 2, a couple touches. And then he's done that damage in 3 games, basically. And again, that's 537 yards worth of offense he's chipped in mostly in 3 weeks. Again, he had a few yards in week 2. Now, Raheem Mostert is listed right now questionable with a knee. Now, I don't know what the issue with him is, but we know Raheem Mostert is not a durable player. He's in his 30s, and so we have to pay attention to that as well. Jeff Wilson did have his practice window open coming off the IR. So as long as he is anywhere close to being ready, Jeff Wilson would likely come into a substantial role. Now, he certainly doesn't have the speed that Achane and Mostert have. But Jeff Wilson certainly can be effective in this offense. We've seen that before. When he was healthy last year, when he first joined the Dolphins, he was very good. He got nicked up and not so good at that point. Couple comments here. Charlene, you have a strong team, play weak team the next couple of weeks. That's good. So Jefferson comes back good. That'll be, yeah, you make the most out of it, right? Fantasy football is about attrition. It's about navigating these unfortunate circumstances, using our depth, and when we have a favorable schedule, that's nice as well. Chris, wow, Chubb, Dobbins, and Achane. Wow, that's a very, very tough spot there. Gitz, I see you're in the house. Welcome. I'm still so. The life of a fantasy analyst is Monday and Tuesday. We're looking back, crunching numbers, watching film to prepare for the next week. So I couldn't even tell you who the week 6 opponents are yet because I'm so busy and crunching and studying to prepare to make my, I do have preliminary projections, of course, but those I, right in and out the head. So but if you have a start sit question, you definitely can. I don't do a show Wednesday and Thursday, but you can message me at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter, and I'll be happy to set you up there. Brian, welcome. Brian, appreciate you as well. All right. So again, Salvon Ahmed, if Mostert has to miss time, and I don't know if Mostert will. Again, he's questionable with the knee. We don't know if that's just maintenance. We don't know if that's actually an issue he has, but just keep an eye on that. But Jeff Wilson is obviously the priority ad right now because we know Mostert's not, going to play a full workload. If he's healthy, he'll get his carries ramped up to 13 to 15 range, but Jeff Wilson will have a good chunk of that as well. So I do recommend picking up Jeff Wilson. He's a priority ad because remember, the speed at receiver, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, the new motions they're using, the half field motions, they are really putting defenses in a bind. And it's just creating running lanes. And the second year of the running offense, you could tell the offensive line of the Dolphins, they now understand even better than last year how to completely run the Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan running offense. And obviously, we don't replace the speed of Achane, but Jeff Wilson will be productive in this situation. Again, I mentioned with Salvon Ahmed, if Mostert has to miss time, again, we don't know if it's a maintenance. I said this before. We don't know if I want to repeat. I don't know if it's maintenance. Don't know if he has an actual legitimate injury. But if he does, and even Jeff Wilson coming back, Ahmed could be a part of that. So again, the depth of your league and keeping an eye on Mostert would necessitate that. But last time I'll say it, Wilson's a priority at Minnesota. Again, we'll see K.J.Osborn. He's been getting targets. He's playing full snaps, but he probably sees more targets. Jordan Addison will obviously have tougher coverage because he'll be like treated like a number one now. But again, he'll get a little volume bump. The one player, if you're in a deep league, like I said, Brandon Powell, they play a lot of 3 receiver sets in Minnesota. He did have 4 for 43 and 6 targets after Jefferson went out, and he would be involved. He's certainly not going to be a dynamite player for you. But again, if you're in a deep league and you just are struggling to get players on the field, we'll go with that. All right, let's see what else we got here. Yeah, so Gitz, definitely pick up him and pick up Wilson and CD Smitty. So right now for Demercado, it looks, this is apparently a minor injury for James Conner. It's supposed to be a short-term injury. So that means 1 to 2 games. So I wouldn't drop a player for that. Jeff Wilson, and we don't know how severe Achane's injury is. The fact they put him on injured reserve very quickly, that tells me maybe it's a 4-week injury, because I think we think that right away. Injured reserve 4 games. All right, see you in 5 weeks. But that's not always the case. If they put him on there that quickly, this could be something a little more serious. I'm not saying it is, but be careful. So Jeff Wilson, it could be a longer term ad. And Roschon Johnson, he's done his best when the Bears are trailing, which has been often. I'll give you that. And he's been very good in the passing game for them. But the offensive line not run blocking well, so he hasn't had the production like Khalil Herbert, who's very explosive. Now Herbert's going to miss probably a month. That's what they're saying. I don't think they put him on IR, but I think the thought is it's a longer-term injury. So, I mean, Roschon's going to have significant work. So, honestly, I would probably – if I knew I was getting at least 4 weeks of Jeff Wilson in that offense, I think I'd put Wilson 1, Tom Laughlin, welcome. I'd put Roschon 2, and then Demercado 3. But here's the thing. Would you drop for them? Najee, it's tough because his broken tackle rate is insanely good. Average yards after contact through the roof, but he's not getting passing work. They're not getting in the red zone. He's getting carries. They're empty carries. The offensive coordinator, I think it was named Matt Canada, terrible. So it makes it really tough. Dropping Najee is tough, but I get it. He's not putting up for fantasy, so I get it. I just don't know if any of those 3 long-term, there's a chance Najee gets a better situation. Possible. Improbable, possible. Where the other guys, I think, are all going to be limited in their scale. So if you were going to go with 1 for him, I would imagine for the full season, Roschon has the best chance of being relevant for the entire season. Miles Sanders, I think, is still hurt. So I think that's the problem. Miles Sanders hurt. I think he's coming back from injury. So they're playing him at less than 100%. I think these last couple of weeks are not reflective of what he was and what he will be. So I think I would probably not drop Miles Sanders. But if you were going to do 1, if you were done with Najee Harris, then long-term Roschon to be your answer. Charlene, what do you got here? Coaches, you use common sense. Why play with players when you're leading big at 7? You know what? You're right. That's a great point. Injuries in the NFL happen all the time. And coaches who are playing players in games that are way out of hand, you tempt fate. I've seen it happen too many times where a player gets hurt, and it's like, why the heck were you in the game? And it's okay. I mean, it doesn't always happen. But again, just why tempt fate? A game is out of hand. Get your backups in. Preserve your starters. Just every less snap you get hit is a good snap for a star player. And then, all right, I got to get to the Monday Night Football review. Bottom of the hour, we got Brandon Kravitz coming in to talk some waivers. If you're enjoying the show, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. Would appreciate that greatly. Also, if you give me a follow at Jim Coventry NFL on the X or Twitter, we'll put threads up there mostly toward the end of the week to get you ready for your fantasy week. And also, if you have Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, Tuesday night, 8 to 10 Eastern, I will be on the show the entire 2 hours with Nick Whalen going over some fantasy football as well. All right, Monday Night Football review. Raiders win 17-13. Not the most fun game to watch, but Josh Jacobs is still getting it done for fantasy, but he's not the dominant player he was last year. Another game where, he can't sniff 4 yards per carry. And the Packers aren't a good run defense. But when you get 20 carries, you get a goal line, another 5 catches. For PPR, Josh Jacobs continues to get it done. So you can't argue with that. Fantasy is about points. And we don't care how we get our points. You don't have to be a superstar. If you give me 20 points or close to it, I love you. right? And that's about right. So definitely looking at it that way. Jimmy Garoppolo, you know, I worried about one thing. Would you force the ball to Devontae Adams if teams, collapse coverage on him? And we saw in week 1, I believe, against Denver, he did a little bit, but when the coverage was tight, he'd go away to Jacoby Myers, which is fine. But we saw last night, Devontae Adams, I don't think it was the injury, because the Packers were really making a point to try to take him out. And the Raiders won, so you can't argue with it. It's a winning. NFL's about winning. We know that, right? It's not about fantasy for them. So Jacoby Myers, I'm glad I roster him in an important league, that's for sure. But I wish I had been more leagues. But he gets 10 targets. And I think that's the point with Jacoby Myers. The attention will be on Adams. Jimmy doesn't like throwing into tight windows if he doesn't have to. And Jacoby Myers typically doesn't have a tight window to throw into. It's basically, the coverage is rolled to Devontae. So I think Jacoby Myers is going to continue to be very, very relevant. He'll have down weeks. Again, even the great receivers do, right? So I'm not worried about that. But Jacoby Myers is a deal. He's a thing right now. And, if you're not rostering him and someone in your league is, and they think the bottom's going to fall out because they think, oh, well, it's just Jacoby Myers, make a trade offer. Maybe somebody will think that, oh, good, I'm getting out of him, because he had a 2 for 33 in week 4. So maybe the fantasy manager is thinking, all right. But if you're rostering him, definitely don't let him go. He's definitely a player that is going to be productive this year. Outside of that, they finally got Michael Mayer involved with 3 targets. That was nice to see that. He had a long catch and run in first half, which was kind of nice to see there. But otherwise, Jimmy for fantasy, Jimmy G, 208 touchdown and a pick. Nothing special there. Again, with Devontae with the down game, 4 for 45, you take it. It's 8.5 PPR points. You would have liked more. Again, I'm just cautioning when you're playing better pass defenses, Jimmy G just might not throw to him enough, but you're not worried. Devontae Adams is still going to post digits for you. So there's no panic button here. Even the game against Patrick Surtain, I think it was 7 for 60, so maybe 766. It was still 13. And of course, Devontae is going to have his week winning games with some regularity because he still is just an absolute amazing, wonderful player. Tyler wants to know, should you pick up Godwin, Osborn, or Davis? Maybe Gabe Davis, you mean? So with Mike Williams coming in back from a hamstring injury, I wonder if Godwin sees a few more targets. I do think coming out of the bye, they're going to get Godwin a little more involved. I would go with Godwin here because I think Godwin has a stable target floor. And I think coming out of the bye, they probably worked on some things. That'd be the player I would look to. And then Charlene, know the scheme of the coach. Coach Shannon will not use CMC and Ayuk with it. Yes. That was a clinic, Charlene. Sunday Night Football. Once the 49ers game was enough out of hand, they were comfortable. You're right. It was Jordan Mason. Ronnie Bell was out there, right? And I mean, you leave your quarterback in, but you don't run dangerous plays. You're not doing 7-step drops. You're not doing things to get your quarterback killed. You're handing the ball off, couple screens. Yeah, you're just so smart. A clinic in keeping your players safe, especially after they lost all their quarterbacks in the NFC Championship game last year. Maybe that was that wasn't because he did anything wrong, but that just makes it remember in your mind. Players can be fragile, so we watch with them. All right, the Packers. That was a tough watch. At least the Raiders got a couple touchdowns. Jordan Love, he's been fine for fantasy until last night. He was getting multiple touchdowns in each game. The Detroit and the New Orleans games, they got buried. They fell way behind, and he got most of his fantasy points in comeback mode. But before those, it was bad. It was really, really bad. And last night was bad from gun to gun. And the Raiders, they had a spirited effort on defense. I'll give them that. And Max Crosby, what an amazing pass rusher. But the fact that, unfortunately, Love had that 77-yard pass to Christian Watson because he would have barely cracked 100 yards if that one went incomplete. That was a bad, barely 50% completion. He's been inaccurate. He's gotten away with it to this point where, again, his fantasy numbers belie the reality. He's not an accurate quarterback. And usually the scheming gets people open. But you see on the deep throws, he's not, and remember this, deep throws are always the lowest completable pass, because that's the lowest, obviously the further you throw, the more margin for error changes, right? But Jordan Love is really inaccurate on deep passes. And so that is a problem, right? And so he did hook up with Watson on the one, burned on the interception late, again, trying to throw it downfield. But I think that is going to be a problem for the Packers. Now, hopefully, and I don't know if Aaron Jones had a setback. I don't know if they saw the bye coming and they thought, you know what, you're not quite there. Let's get you really 20 days off, because with the bye, it's, 7, then 7, then another 6 until game day. So maybe they just want to get him back full strength, because if they don't have Aaron Jones, this offense is going to be in major trouble, because basically Jones is a runner and a receiver. It really opens things up, and it opens the playbook up for Matt LaFleur, and they're going to need him. Now, A.J. Dillon, again, he gave it what he had. Couldn't get 4 yards per carry against a bad Raiders run defense. He punches in a touchdown. So for fantasy, if you started him, it was very nice. Here's what I don't understand, and this is, I won't spend time on this, but Emmanuel Wilson is on the regular roster, 53-man roster, and yet whenever Jones is out, Wilson gets pushed down. They call up Patrick Taylor from the practice squad, and Taylor plays like 36% of the snaps. Now, maybe it's because Taylor is maybe the switch off for Jones. Maybe they see Wilson as more the guy that would chip in for what Dillon does. Maybe it's that. So that was kind of crazy. Romeo Doubs, I didn't know to this level. And somebody before the game asked me, do I start Myers or do I start Doubs? And I said, I'd start Myers, but I'd call it 55-45. I didn't say it was a slam dunk. But what I did mention last week, remember, I told people, consider trading Romeo Doubs. And this might not last, but he had 25 targets in his last 2 games. And I said that the pass attempts aren't going to be ridiculously high like they were in those 2 blowout losses. The only time you're going to see Jordan Love throw those pass attempts is when they're getting blown out. Last night was 30. The first couple games, around 28. When you have that few attempts, and you have Christian Watson back, and you're throwing to the tight end 7 times, and you have a number of receivers, Romeo Doubs is going to see more games with like 4 targets, 5 targets. And a lot of his stuff is short. He's good in the red zone, but if you're only getting that many targets, it was his 1 for 4. That's not indicative of what he'll be. I mean, Romeo Doubs is a very good football player. But if your target is to throw 30 passes a game, and he's the underneath guy, there may be a very hard cap on how many games he actually does really well. Luke Musgrave is getting targets. So he had a 6 for 49 a couple of weeks ago, and then he got hurt. He got a 6 for 34. So, overall not massive yardage, but good enough. And they're using him. They're definitely scheming him out, and they're calling his number. So I think in a PPR league, Luke Musgrave is right on that borderline of, top 15 tight ends, and the usage is great. Probably not much more to say. Christian Watson looked great. The quarterback may limit him a bit. He caught the long ball, so it was 3 for 91 on 6 targets. He was targeted in the end zone a couple times. So, again, he's going to be at the mercy of Jordan Love's accuracy, which, remember, last year, Christian Watson was on the good side of Aaron Rodgers' deep ball accuracy. So that was quite a change, right? So we'll see what happens with that. All right, let's move on. Remember, RotoWire Fantasy Football Live. If you're enjoying the show, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button if you're on RotoWire YouTube. And we have Brandon Kravitz coming in at the bottom of the hour. Let's see, we got a couple more comments here. Admiral. All right, what do you got? Drop or hold Cam Akers for Will. So I could totally understand moving off of Akers. I think I'm an Akers truther. All right. So whatever I say about Akers, always take it with a grain of salt. I have to think, even if it's the bye week, they have to move him in over Alexander Mattison. Madison had 2 good games against 2 horrific defenses. He has been terrible against everybody else. He had another drop touchdown pass. He had a fumble. It was at last week. He is just a terrible. He's a backup running back. Cam Akers in that same game where Madison went like 17 for 95, Akers went 5 for 40. Akers is a much better player. I have to think that at some point they're like, okay, take your shot, guy. And I imagine, but if you don't want to wait, and a lot of people think, well, Cam Akers, they don't like him. They don't think he's very good. And I understand. It's fine. So if you need to drop him, I would keep him because I think he's good. But if you can't, Jamison Williams, Dan Campbell has made so many comments about him needing reps. I don't know if his package of plays is limited. He has game tilting speed. We know that. I just don't see there's going to be consistency to his game. Jeff Wilson, if Achane's injury ends up being way more than 4 weeks, that would be a real reasonable add. Demercado, unless the news changed recently, the coaching staff in Arizona said it's a short-term injury for James Conner, which might mean a week or two. So I wouldn't add him. Tyjae Spears, he's playing over 50% of the snaps, roughly. Well, right around 50, I should say. And as we look at Tyjae Spears, explosive, catches the ball, runs. Yards off the top of my head I don't have, but it's been like 50 yards in the last couple of games. And he's going to be a part of that offense. So I do think you consider him. I would keep Akers over. But again, if we don't know about Achane's knee, if that's going to be an 8-week injury, I go Jeff Wilson, because if he's going to be in that offense and Mostert, gets nicked up, he could have some very, very good numbers. Wilson was, and I said this earlier in the show, Wilson was very, very good when he got traded to Miami, and then he got dinged up. And after that, he wasn't very good. So health was always an issue with him. All right, let's see what we got here. A couple more. Let's see. Dagan 4TW. Thoughts on JSN? So, yeah, you know what? This is what I said preseason about him, and I haven't changed my take. Seattle runs a ton of 2 tight end sets. That means 2 receivers are on the field most of the time. DK Metcalf ain't going nowhere. Tyler Lockett ain't going nowhere. That leaves very little for Jackson Smith and Jigba. And then here's the thing. When they do use 3 receiver sets, okay, he'll get some passes, but they're not going to say, well, all right, well, JSN's in the game. We've got to get him the ball. No, they got Metcalf, they got Lockett, and the ball can go equally around all 3 of them. So, and that's on the passing downs. That's when JSN is actually on the field. So I don't think we have many big games from him. I don't think the targets are going to be there. I don't think there are many 5-target games, for him. I don't think there are many. And so depending on the depth of your league, if it's a really, really deep league, then okay, maybe. But I don't think, unless one of those 2 gets hurt, Metcalf or Lockett, or misses time, I should say, I don't think JSN this year is going to be a factor. They just, it's literally over 60% of the snaps they play 2 tight end sets. So there's that. All right. And then Admiral, you're welcome. And Charlene, 5-0. Wow, that's fantastic. Great start. I wish I had more 5-0s. Don't have many of those right now. Been a tough start. All right. Usually do risers and fallers, but I had so many good questions and comments, and we had so much pertinent info to talk about today. Never really got to them. For a minute, I'll talk about Sam Howell. Look, he's not a good NFL quarterback. Not good at all. He holds the ball too long, takes too many hits, doesn't always identify the second read. But for fantasy, you got to use him. Because typically, like against the Bears, he was garbage. 388 and 2. And he runs for a bit too. So again, sometimes you hold your nose and you just start these guys. Brandon Kravitz, week 5 is in the books. How are things going, sir?
I can't complain. So far, so good. Definitely reeling from some of the injury news that we got this morning, but just that's what we're here for, trying to make the most of it. This is all part of the fantasy season-long experience, Jim.
Brandon, and the one thing I pointed out earlier that I want fantasy managers to understand, when a player goes on IR, most of us are optimists. And we see IR, we think, okay, 4 games, C and 5. Maybe, but right. Not necessarily. Yeah. Don't automatically assume any injury is a 4-week injury. Like they saying Achane and knee, and they quickly put him on IR. At least they gave Jefferson a day to put him on. So maybe they had to think about something, right? So, yeah. But that said, it could be 4 games, but just don't automatically assume. When you're planning your roster out and you're making your chess game moves, because we don't play checkers here, we play chess. We try to think steps ahead. So just plan it out as a longer term. Any comments on those injuries or Jefferson or Achane?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, and we'll get into what you're supposed to do now moving forward with those guys out of the lineup. More than anything, it sucks to see whether you had these guys or not, especially if you had them. They're such exciting players. Devon Achane has been just a revelation at the running back position. Number 2 in total yards, 37th in attempts. That's efficiency that I don't know if I've ever seen in my life.
No.
Right? I mean, that's can you think of anybody off the top of your head that's been able to pull that off in several weeks?
I'm probably twice your age, and I haven't seen efficiency like that. 12.1 yards per carry. I get it, small sample size. I don't care. It's 12.1 yards per carry.
Yeah.
These players are going to be missed. Hopefully they're back soon. Like you said, they're a wonderful part of the game. Whether you roster them or not, we need them playing as many games as possible so we can enjoy their greatness. Brandon, before we get started, remind people of your Twitter handle, and we'll go out over your work at the end.
Yeah, you can find me at Brandon Kravitz on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, across the social media landscape. I got you covered.
All right. So, Brandon, we're going to go over some waivers today. He's available in some leagues. Give us a quarterback that might be a useful opportunity play for fantasy.
Yeah, I threw him out there because I see that, at least in the leagues I'm in, he's about 50% available. I think I saw on CBS they say he's 63% rostered. But Matt Stafford's somebody that's definitely worth a look if he is on your waiver wire. Upside now is to the moon. I mean, he was limited without Cooper Kupp in the lineup, but now he's back, and I think that we can look at him as a week-to-week starter. 222 through the air and 2 touchdowns. He should be good for that most weeks. At the very least, he's a streamable option this week, going up against the Cardinals defense in week 6. Arizona allows the 6th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Of course, if he's not available, you could look the way of Sam Howell, because it looks like he has some things cooking. I mean, he's going to give you some down weeks. Him and Desmond Ridder are guys that I love what I saw from them from a fantasy perspective, but they're so hard to trust in terms of actually inserting them into your lineup, because 6 points could be right around the corner from you.
100%. Ed, great call those. Quick question from Charlene. Charlene just wants to know who the number 3 in the Lions is. It would be Craig Reynolds. And yeah, he will get some run in games, so they're not hesitant to use him. So that would be your number 3 in Detroit, Charlene. All right, going to running back. What are you thinking of running back? How about a few different options for us, Brandon?
Yeah, we're going to look at Emari Demercado, Jeff Wilson, and Roschon Johnson. This is the real beef of the waiver wire to me. Jeff Wilson, you go back to the leagues that I play in, just trying to see, I use this segment as I prep what I want to talk to you about. Also use it as an opportunity to set my waiver wire for the night about 15 minutes before I hop on. Little peek behind the curtain for me. Jeff Wilson's not available anywhere that I look. Usually if you have IR spots available in your league, he's not there. But for those that play in leagues where that's not an option, my guess is that he'll be on the waiver wire and you should snatch him up. He's an explosive runner, and we see how well that plays in the Miami Dolphins offense. Roschon Johnson is somebody I'm not going to spend too much time on. I think we've talked about him almost every week here on this YouTube show. So hopefully by now you've added Roschon Johnson. Khalil Herbert might miss some time, and so he would be the top guy. The guy that is universally available, though, that should really slide to the top of your list overall is Emari Demercado out of TCU. Carried the rock 10 times after James Conner left the game on Sunday. 45 yards and a touchdown. He's got 4.4 speed, incredibly agile with the ball in his hands. I think he's going to put up some numbers for Arizona.
You know, I got lucky, Brandon, in the Kings Classic. It's 14 teams, 3 flex. I played with some of the heavyweights in the industry in that one, and I had James Conner. And before the game, I had like an IR spot where I moved somebody. And I go, you know what? Let me just add Demercado to my roster in case Conner gets hurt. Because I always roster Conner and he always misses time.
Always.
I got him on the right week and picked him up Sunday. So now I don't have to sweat that one. But yeah, he is universally available, except for degenerates like me in 14-team leagues. That's about the only place. And I know people in that league are going to get a couple messages today saying, what the hell? And it's going to be funny. Anyway,
yeah, right. They're going to see it says you can swap for this guy. You can't add him. Too bad.
Isn't that the worst?
That's
it's
great.
Like ESPN. You click a player and it's a swap sign. Like, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the W for waivers. That's fabulous, Brandon. All right, let's go to wide receiver. Who's a couple pickups that you're looking at?
K.J.Osborn and Curtis Samuel slide to the top of the list for me. K.J.Osborn is, if I were to just lay out the priority of all of the players on waiver, it would be, and it depends on what you need, but Emari Demercado 1, K.J.Osborn 2. I think that he is that valuable in terms of an asset to add. It took off once Justin Jefferson hit the sidelines on Sunday against the Chiefs. Osborn set season highs in targets, receptions, receiving yards. So obviously he's going to be more involved, and you've got a month now guaranteed with Justin Jefferson hitting the IR. Minnesota leads the league with 40 pass attempts per game, and Osborn's going to play a significant role in that passing game while Jefferson is out. Curtis Samuel, we're looking at 2 solid games in a row here, so let's not overthink this. He's got more targets than Jahan Dotson over the last 2 weeks. He's simply been reliable for this offense, an offense that's struggling to find its footing. We know he's a versatile player, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he just was more and more involved. He's a guy that we've wanted to see fantasy consistency from over the years. Haven't always gotten it, but that doesn't mean it can't happen, and he's definitely got the talent to do it.
You know, when we look at Samuel, I think it fits perfectly because we know Sam Howell is under self-inflicted, under a ton of pressure. So I have to think the coaching staff is dialing up a lot of quick passes, and that's Curtis Samuel's part of the field. And I really do think it's a reaction to the quarterback they have to help him find some success. So I do think it could stick because we've seen Samuel have little stretches before, but I think you're onto something here, Brandon, because in the current state of his offense, they kind of need him. And he could be, he's not going to have you 20-point games, but he's going to give you some solid flex numbers, maybe even wide receiver 3 numbers, depending on how deep your league is. But yeah, that's a good call there. How about tight end, Brandon?
I'm going to go back to the well. I think this is week 2 in a row where I've got Dalton Schultz here as my pickup. It felt like it was more fluky, and I was just throwing stuff at the wall. That's no fluke, Jim. 10 targets, 7 catches, 65 yards. Second week in a row, he's gotten into the end zone. Stroud is going to take what the defense gives him. He has already shown that he's a pro quarterback in that regard. The Falcons have really good corners, so it opened up the middle of the field for Dalton Schultz, and he took advantage. I love seeing that tight end safety blanket in use. That's what I thought Dalton Schultz would be coming into the season. It's taken a couple of weeks, but I think he's a guy that we can now roster moving forward. So I feel comfortable just saying set it and forget it with Dalton Schultz. He should be on fantasy rosters across the board.
I do want to throw out a couple devil's advocate questions for you, Brandon. So 2 weeks ago, Schultz got the touchdown pass from Singletary. This week, Schultz got targeted a ton when Tank Dell had the concussion and was knocked out of the game. Dell's a slot receiver. I'm just very concerned there was correlation, but I still agree with you that Schultz is going to be a functional part of the offense, but his targets shot way up when they lost Dell. Any comments on that?
Well, I guess my rebuttal would be I would think that those targets for Tank Dell would go the way of Robert Woods because he's more of an intermediate receiver as well. So if they were going to go the way of a wide receiver, it would go Robert Woods. Now, he did end up getting an uptick in targets in his own right, but I think Dalton Schultz is carving out his own little niche in that offense and something that in the red zone is really going to be where his bread is buttered. So that's where I think there's it's a great question, but I think Tank Dell also, he's got the ability to play outside and he's going to be their deep threat. So I don't see the connection quite there outside of the fact that short intermediate stuff.
I like it. And Schultz, big target in the red zone, so you can't argue with that either. So nice call on that one as well. How about the offensive special teams?
So I don't love the fact that they're flying back over from London to take on the Colts here, but I do like the fact that the Jags get Gardner Minshew, a guy that I know he's had some nice games. This is not an elite NFL talent, and he's a guy that some of the players on the Jags, I'd have to go back and look at the roster correlation between Gardner Minshew and some of the defensive players, but I'm thinking there's some familiarity there with Gardner Minshew's time in Jacksonville. And more than anything, the Jags have been creating havoc. 5 turnovers over the last 2 games. They got after Josh Allen. If they can do that to him, they can do it to Minshew.
They are dialing up some very interesting blitz concepts, and I was very impressed with the way they were deploying that. Tyson Campbell is really becoming a top-end cornerback for them, and that allows them flexibility defensively. And they were without Devin Lloyd in that game, and if they get him back, which sounds like a short-term injury, that's going to make this defense even faster. So I think that's in just this week, but also like if you're even looking a couple weeks out, I think Brandon, the Jags are a great call for that. A couple comments in here. Charlene brought up Leonard Fournette. I always question Brandon. I wonder what kind of shape he's in right now. And I wonder if he's even ready to play football, even if he got a call. What are your thoughts on rostering Fournette as a stash?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's information that we just don't have, is how much he'd be able to hit the ground running, where he would end up if he ends up anywhere. So if you've got a roster spot available and you just can't seem to find anybody, maybe you play in a freak degenerate league like Jim and you just need somebody to put on your roster in that case. But otherwise, there are just too many players that are getting usage right now to factor in somebody that, for all we know, could be sitting back on his couch with a bag of potato chips.
Exactly. And I tell you, because there have been years where he wasn't like having the contract he wanted and he wasn't in the best of shape.
He wasn't a good running back the last time we saw him on the field either. So he's not a guy. Look at Ezekiel Elliott. The Elliott didn't miss any time in terms of, he popped onto a roster fairly quickly, and he hasn't been good. These guys fall off a cliff. It's the unfortunate nature of the position.
That is true. And then Emma's asking if Devontae Adams was a decoy last night. Brandon, the way I saw it was the Packers bracketed and played really hard coverage on him, and Jimmy doesn't like throwing in tight windows. So Jimmy just said, all right, I'll throw to Jacoby Myers. Myers was sitting open because of all the attention they paid on Adams. I don't think Adams was hurt last night because when he went to the ground and he got hit, it didn't look like more than just like a second and he was up. So I don't think the injury was a major problem. You have any thoughts on that?
So I don't think he was a decoy. 4 catches, 45 yards aren't really decoy stats. That's just not a great statistical game. Decoy stats are like 1 catch, 1 target kind of. That's what a decoy looks like. I think he was still hurt. Probably a guy that would not have played had he not been going up against the team he spent his career with on prime time. So it was one of those games just as a competitor he wanted to be out there for, but I don't think the Raiders put him out there with the idea that we're just going to hide him. We don't really see teams do that all that much anymore. I think that's something that we in the fantasy community tend to use more than is reality. But like you said, Jim, they just took what the defense gave him. And shout out to Jair Alexander. I mean, he had that one circled on his schedule just as much as Devontae Adams did. And he's an excellent corner back on the field after missing some time.
Yeah, no question. That Jair Alexander is elite. Uncle Ted's in the house. We have one last question here. Brian Pope's asking about Tyler Algier being worth a roster spot. He is getting a lot of volume, but between him and the Falcons' run blocking, it is not to the dominant level it was last year. I think defenses are daring Desmond Ridder to beat them, and Algier he was 5 yards a carry. I think 5.2 yards per carry. He's not getting 3 this year. And so right now, I say it's probably a lost cause unless he falls in the end zone in a given week. Do you see it any differently?
I mean, I look at Tyler Algier as a handcuff more than a guy that after week 1, I thought, okay, this could be a flex option moving forward. And kind of the way we view the Dolphins backfield before Achane got hurt, where you can use both Achane and Mostert. And, that was the kind of way that after week 1, we went, okay, Bijan Robinson's great, but Tyler Algier is a flex. That's clearly not the case anymore. But look, these running backs are dropping like flies. So you can't go putting high value handcuffs on the waiver wire. We're talking about Emari Demercado today. What kind of conversation are we having if, God forbid, Bijan Robinson goes down, about how much fab or waiver priority you'd put into Tyler Algier? So keep him on your roster.
Man, if that didn't set the tone, right, who is on the waiver wire? Right, you can't really drop these guys. So pick them up, and you're right, these high leverage, top backups, they need to be on rosters, unless you're in an 8 or 10 team league. And maybe 8 or 10 team league, maybe you can get away with it, and that's it.
Yeah, like I have, I've got a league where I keep staring at Tank Bigsby, who's done almost nothing, at least nothing that you can use in your starting lineup. I refuse to drop him. Travis Etienne's dealt with injuries in the past. It should be at least a decent offense. It seems like they're getting things together a bit in Jacksonville. Just not a guy I'm willing to throw out on waivers. Not everybody on your bench needs to put up double-digit points. It's funny how it works, Jim. Every week we get hit up. Oh, I had so-and-so on my bench. They went off. Yeah. That's what happens when you have good players on your bench. Not everybody can be in your starting lineup, but same sort of logic here is that not everybody on your bench needs to be scoring. Some guys are there for the lottery ticket sort of appeal.
Speaking of going off on the bench, Zach Moss. Yeah, I started Jonathan Taylor, benched Moss. Yeah, nice call, Jim. Real nice. For whatever. All right. Charlene said thanks. Told me to enjoy the weekend, realizing my Wednesday and Thursday is my weekend. So thank you. And Brandon, tell everybody where they can find you and your work.
At Brandon Kravitz is how you can find me across all social platforms. Go ahead and throw me a follow on X/Twitter. I'd love to chat with you about all things fantasy. You can find me on the Fantasy Bites podcast, all part of the RotoWire podcast network. That's 7 days a week. I've got you covered Monday through Friday, 5-minute episodes, really quick. Everything you need to know in a very short dose. I know you lead busy lives, so I get you in and out with no problem or sweat whatsoever. And if you're ever in the Orlando area, come and catch me 3 to 6 p.m. on FM 96.9 The Game on iHeartRadio.
That's Brandon Kravitz. Every Tuesday he's on the show. You don't want to miss it. We are off Wednesday and Thursday. Be back Friday with Gambling Show. Saturday, DFS Show. Sunday, the Starts It. Every day, 11 a.m. Eastern, where you're watching it. For Brandon Kravitz, I'm Jim Coventry. Have a great day, everyone.
Enjoy your weekend, Jim.